Payroll. We're going to talk about how what you don't know can hurt you and how to avoid costly mistakes in your bridal business. So today we are going to talk about best practices. What does good look like? The 3 most common mistakes that you can make in your bridal shop and tools to get you there and how we can help. So first, I just want to say people are your most important asset. You know this deep down. If you want to build your business, you need to treat your people right. So don't F up their pay. Okay? We're going to talk about how to not do that. So let's get into what does good payroll look like? Pay people on time, accurately, and stay out of tax jail. So how do you do that? Okay, I'm going to go into some components of what good payroll looks like. The first one has to do with benefits and compensation. So that's just like the total package of what you're giving your team. You have an agreement with your team. You know, they come to work for you, they help you build your business, and they get something back. So how are you paying your people, and how is that streamlined? You want them to be able to see what they're getting paid and it aligns with what you've agreed. So streamlined management of wages, bonuses, commissions, benefits, ensuring accuracy and transparency for all employees. Next, timekeeping, accrual. When I say accrual, I mean accrual of paid time off, for example, of benefits, all of that good stuff, and scheduling. So you want to be confident that this data is correct. So that means reliable tracking of their hours worked. A lot of you are doing this tracking in BridalLive. Do you know that it's reliable and that it aligns with the payroll that you're processing in your payroll processing system? So reliable tracking of hours work, of leave balances, so the paid time off or unpaid time off, and shift scheduling to support accurate payroll processing. Next, your actual payroll processing. So what does that look like? You want automated calculation and timely payment of wages, taxes, and deductions to minimize errors and delays. What do I mean by that? When I say automated, that's where the emphasis is here, because when you get into a good payroll system, what this means is that the calculation of the payment, wages, and taxes is automated based on the rates in your state and federal tax rates, so that you're not doing those calculations by hand. Because when you're trying to do those calculations by hand, that's where there's a chance for errors. So you want these things to be automated in order to avoid errors. We'll get into more of this detail a little bit later on. Next, reporting systems. You want to be able to see easily all of your payroll in your reporting system. So what this means is clear, customizable reports to monitor payroll costs, tax filings, and compliance metrics. Let's say you get audited and you don't have the reports that you need for a given period. That's going to be a really uncomfortable situation for you, and then you're going to be facing all kinds of penalties, interest, accounting costs, all kinds of issues. And with payroll, it's really hard to go back in time and get those, if not impossible, to go back in time and get those records. Next is compliance systems. So this means built-in safeguards to stay updated with labor laws. When I say compliance, we're always talking about rules and regulations. So labor laws, tax regulations, statutory requirements, okay? So you want to be up to date on the compliance, the laws, rules, regulations, and that you have built-in safeguards, or another word for this that you might hear me talk about a lot is controls. So first we talked about automations, so once you know what those tax rates are and everything, that you have that humming along, but are you staying up to date with the laws and regulations to make sure that you are in compliance? Next is cultural communications or communication with your team. So what does that look like? That means open, consistent communication about your payroll policies. That can be what is your compensation structure? Probably some of you have heard me talk about compensation structure and building the compensation structure for your team. Now, do you have the reporting? Are you presenting the reports to them to make sure that they're getting paid in accordance with that compensation structure? So you want to build trust and promote that workplace satisfaction, or I think go beyond satisfaction to just having people that are happy and that trust you as their employer. Okay, now let's talk about the three most common mistakes that you can make. So the first one is going to be DIY payroll processing, and I'll talk about what that means on a couple different levels, because it's okay when you're at a certain level, it's okay to do a certain level of DIY, but how much DIY do you want to do, and at what level do you want to get some help through being in the right payroll processing system, or at what point do you want to reach out to get professional help? And then the next one is going to be incorrect benefit deductions or garnishments. And the next one is incorrect employee classification. So let's dig into these so that they make a little bit more sense to you. First, DIY payroll processing and filing. Okay, so first of all, what it looks like for DIY payroll processing and filing. So the first version of this is that the owners or managers are manually processing payroll using spreadsheets or pen and paper. That's kind of the most dangerous version of DIY. It's also the easiest to fix, okay? So if you are doing this, you want to get into a payroll processing platform. We'll talk about that in the fix. And then next is the filing, that you're doing DIY filing. So tax forms are filed. For example, the W-2s, 1099s, or quarterly payroll taxes, that you're doing those filings without the assistance of payroll software or without the assistance of a professional. The next version of this is reliance on free online calculators or limited tools. So basically, you're trying to kind of piece together your payroll processing or filing by looking around online and saying, okay, I'll just plug this into a calculator in order to figure out my taxes and my wages. And, yeah, no problem. And then I'll just, yeah, okay, I have the IRS form. I can just plug the numbers in over here. Okay, well, do they all match up? Do they match your financials in QuickBooks? Probably not. Then what happens when you get audited? What happens when you have an employee come and ask you a question? There's consequences into that. The next thing is manual data entry into QuickBooks without reconciliation or controls. So without a check and balance is what I mean. So maybe you're doing this payroll processing, payroll filing, and then you're going and you're entering this manually into QuickBooks. And by manual, I just mean that there's no accounting controls. So when we do a payroll reconciliation for our clients, what we're doing is we are checking the the payroll reports in your payroll platform match the payroll reports in QuickBooks, okay? And if they don't, then that indicates that there was a payroll processing error. And then we go and we find what was the source of that error. So let's say we do have a DIY client in that, say they're in Gusto for payroll processing, and they were processing payroll on their own, and we find a discrepancy. Then we can go back and we can find what was the source of that discrepancy. So then maybe it is that they were processing payroll, or they wrote a check outside of payroll. It wasn't processed inside of payroll. Well, that means that they're out of compliance. Then we can go back and we can fix that problem. So most of the time, there's a good chance that if you're doing payroll processing on your own, payroll filing on your own, that you don't have this control in place. You don't have this reconciliation process in place because you're not an accountant. You don't have these things built out. So that's just another version of DIY. So what are the risks and the consequences to DIY either processing or filing? So the first one is errors in calculations. As I've alluded to, you can have mistakes in tax withholdings, deductions, or pay amounts even, and this can lead to underpayments or overpayments, either in wages or in taxes, payroll taxes. The next one is missed deadlines. So forgetting or delaying payroll tax filings or deposits, and this can result in fines, penalties, and interest charges. One thing that I'm going to say is that I've seen is that I have actually seen people use payroll or that do the filing on their own, and they will postpone filing as a cash management strategy. Don't do this. Don't do this. I'm saying this as a not to do, as a cash management strategy, or try to deal with cash flow issues. And this is, you do not want to do this. This is going to get you in trouble. You're going to end up with penalties and interest. It puts you at an audit risk. But where they're in there and they don't have, they have a payroll platform that could potentially do the filing for them, but they've chosen to do the filing on their own, or even to delay filing because they don't want, they don't want to pay the taxes so that they can have that cash up front. And this is not the place to do it. You can deal with cash flow issues somewhere else, but I would not do it. I wouldn't mess with the IRS, okay? So the next thing is non-compliance. So related to this is really where I'm using this example, is filing incorrect forms or failing to follow state and federal regulations that can trigger audits and penalties, okay? Um, and then of course, employee dissatisfaction, and you're going to hear me as a broken record on this, that errors in paychecks, incorrect hours, missing deductions, those can harm employee trust and morale. And just the impression that your employees have of you as an employer, you don't want to mess around with that. So um, it's worth it to get this stuff right. And then just time drain. I mean, getting into a good payroll platform is worth that is a small leap in terms of the cost. So getting into a payroll platform is a first step. So DIY payroll processing, it consumes valuable time that could be better spent growing the business. If you are not already in a payroll platform, that's a first step, okay? So let's talk about the fix. So the first thing is invest in payroll software. So platforms like Gusto, QuickBooks, Payroll, or ADP to automate calculations, tax filing, and employee payments. Our personal favorite is Gusto. So I'm going to put the link below, our partner link, but any of those three are going to be, those are our top three choices, but our first choice is Gusto. Gusto is our first choice because the main reason is user friendliness. That is, they also have good customer service, but they have built their platform really with business owners in mind, where some of the other platforms are much more oriented towards accountants. So especially if you are kind of in this middle ground of DIY, you're going to continue doing the payroll processing, but you want to be in a platform that is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here and going to help you with some of these compliance issues. That's what I would recommend. You want to choose software that integrates seamlessly with your accounting systems. And then automate your tax payments and filing. So the major platforms are going to do this. And you want to set up automated payroll tax calculations and electronic submissions to ensure that deadlines are met. So your payroll platforms can do this for you. I highly recommend that you're not doing your payroll filing on your own. This is going to take all of that payroll processing, roll it up into your filing. And then third is you can outsource payroll management. And this is kind of an advanced move. I mean, usually for bridal shops, you get here when you get to a certain number of employees. It might be somewhere between 10 and 20, where managing payroll starts to feel overwhelming. At that point, you can hire a payroll specialist, or you can reach out and work with us if you have somebody that you're already working with. That's where you can start to consider bringing on a professional. The next, and then this is if you're doing this on your own, is just establish a payroll calendar. So using tools or reminders to track payroll deadlines and ensuring timely payment and filing. So you don't want to get behind on payroll processing, and you don't want to get behind on payroll filing. So internally, when we're servicing our clients, we have everything on a calendar. We have, with regards to processing, we have everything on a calendar with regards to filing. So all of that is kind of processed out for us. Even with even with that payroll software in place, we have all of those processes, all of those dates in place so that we're not dropping the ball with our clients. And then just finally, you want to educate yourself on the payroll basics. And I'm going to say this for any domain, whether it's payroll, marketing, your financials, anything, as the CEO in your business, you want to understand things at a high level. So even if somebody else is taking over things at the transaction level or in the weeds, you want to understand the basic concepts. So what we do with our clients is we are having quarterly meetings so that we can be on the same page, and also so that we can educate our clients on any of those kind of blind spots or anything that they're unclear on. Because whenever you're working with a professional, you don't want it to be a kind of set it and forget it relationship. You want to make sure that that relationship is encouraging your learning of that domain in the business, because that is going to help your profitability and growth over the long term. So that's the level that you want to be at, even as you're delegating work out in order to save your own time. Mistake number 2 is incorrect benefit deductions or garnishments. And this is a big one, because once you get into benefits, offering your employees benefits, that's where things start to get a little bit gnarly. Things start to get more complicated. So this is another point at which, if you are processing payroll on your own, that might be a point at which you want to start reaching out for help. There's a couple ways that you can get help here. So I'll just talk about how we serve our clients. It's that payroll reconciliation that we talked about. So even if you continue to process your payroll on your own, for our clients, we have this option where we will do the payroll reconciliation, which offers that level of control, so that we can identify any errors that those clients might have made in doing their own processing. And then the other one is if you just want to move that payroll off your plate completely, and that relates to just your time. Is it worth your time, or do you want to free up your time to do something else? But benefits are where things start to get complicated, whether it's retirement benefits, health benefits, that kind of thing. And then garnishments, I'll get into that. So this is what this looks like. Miscalculating employee contributions for benefits like health insurance, retirement plans, or flexible spending accounts. There's more than this, but that just gives you an idea. And then the next one that is related is miscalculating benefit deductions or applying benefit deductions inconsistently across pay periods. So this can manifest in a number of ways, just in terms of making errors in contributions and deductions, or missing deductions altogether. And then if I'm going to tie these two together, another place that people can kind of muck this up is not even understanding that you have both contributions and deductions, places where the company is contributing and that there are deductions coming out of the employee paychecks. So that's just another area where you could potentially learn how these work. And then ideally, what you want to see is those broken out in your P&L. And so for our clients where we're doing payroll reconciliations and what we call detailed payroll posting, we're able to go in and break out the contributions and deductions separately because we are posting at the paycheck level, so that you can see all those benefits in detail and broken out to those different accounts in terms of 401k contributions and deductions, health benefits contributions and deductions. So that's ideally what you want to be able to see in your financials. Next is deducting amounts that exceed legal or contractual limits. So what I mean by that is that each of these benefits, or most of these benefits, they actually have limits set by the IRS. So for example, an HRA, which is a health benefit, that has a contractual limit of, it's a little bit over 500. Can't tell you what it is in 2024. 401ks have limits. Various retirement benefits have limits, and they're all set by the IRS and they change every year. So if you are paying out in excess of those benefits, you are out of compliance. So what that means is that the IRS wants to see that money taxed. The next piece of this is not updating deductions after employee life changes. At BridalVision, we call these transitions. We think of them as transitions, and we kind of have a whole list of them. But it's, for example, marriage, dependents, enrollment updates. So you want to make sure that when you have these employee life changes or these transition points, that those are actually getting updated in the payroll settings in your payroll platform immediately. Because if they don't get updated, then your wages, your taxes, your deductions, all those things are going to be incorrect. Going back to the employee trust and the employee satisfaction, that's going to go down if those are not being reflected properly in your in the employee paychecks. And then the next one is failing to deduct garnishments. So garnishments, the most common one is child support. Another one can be tax levies. That's if an employee didn't pay their taxes. And you need to deduct those according to the correct amounts or priorities. And so you're going to get a notice from the state on this, and you need to follow their instructions. That's super important. So let's talk about risks and consequences of incorrect benefit deductions or garnishments. Okay, the first one is tax implications. So the tax implications can be errors in pre-tax or post-tax benefit deductions, and this can result in incorrect tax filing and IRS penalties. So you don't want that. You do not want taxes and penalties. And you don't want to pay back taxes. The longer that this is happening, the more expensive it becomes. Again, employee dissatisfaction. Employees can lose trust if their paychecks reflect incorrect deductions or if their benefits are jeopardized. And then legal action and financial penalties. So for incorrect garnishments, like child support, that can lead to fines from the courts or agencies from non-compliance. And failing to comply with court-ordered garnishments could even lead to legal consequences. So that could include liability for the full amount of the debtor's debt. So what I mean by that is you could end up in some instances, if you do not pay those garnishments to the correct party, you could end up liable for the debt of your employee. Um, and then also paying attorney's fees and court costs. So just don't ignore garnishments. Sometimes people will ignore things that are uncomfortable, that they don't understand. This is why I'm doing this talk, like just to try to shine a light on the things that might be complicated, might be uncomfortable, that you don't fully understand, just to say, like, don't ignore it. If you are prone to ignoring things, just reach out and get help. If this helps shine a light on things to the point where like you feel a little bit more comfortable, you feel like, okay, I can handle that, then great. Just move forward on them. Don't just stick your head in the sand and ignore it, because the penalties can be severe. I've seen clients that have had to go back and deal with payroll issues and that they've ignored for years, and it can be very costly. And then finally is just the administrative burden. And this gets to the ignoring the things that you don't want to face factor, which is fixing deduction errors retroactively, or any kind of payroll errors retroactively, requires time-consuming adjustments. That means filing amended returns, potentially, and it may even involve reimbursing employees. And that last one can be rough. I mean, especially if the employee isn't even with you anymore. So it's administrative costs, it's accounting costs, it's like we talked about up here, tax implications of going back and paying back taxes. So it is, if you have an issue, deal with it now, because it's only going to get worse. Now let's talk about the fix. So first of all, again, payroll software, use payroll software with built-in compliance tools. So you'll notice that I'm talking about the same fix, but the reason shifts around. So I think it's worth repeating myself. So you want to use payroll software with built-in compliance tools and leverage systems that automate deductions and apply correct pre or post tax rules. And you want to ensure that the software supports garnishment processing and prioritization. Okay, so what do I mean by that? When you are using this payroll software, so again, Gusto does all this stuff, but what you can do is when you enter, you can enter your benefit deductions into the settings, and it will automate those deductions, those pre-tax and those post-tax deductions. That is what I mean by this. And then also the garnishment processing. So in most cases, you can enter those garnishments into the payroll software, and it will take care of the garnishments for you. I do urge you to double check this, because it can be state by state. So just check your state laws with regards to garnishments, check that original notice, just double check it, because you want to make sure that absolutely sure that you're in compliance. And then next, just stay updated on laws and limits. So what I mean by this is just monitor federal, state, and local laws regarding garnishments and benefit deductions. those change. They change from year to year. The benefit deductions change from year to year. Make sure that if you get a notice in the mail, make sure that you are updating your settings in your payroll software, okay? You might notice that you're getting notices saying that you're off. That might be because your settings aren't up to date. So just keep up to date on all that stuff. And then understand the contribution limits for benefits like 401k plans, HRAs, FSAs, etc. Because like I said, those limits, they change year to year. And the IRS just sets new limits every year. So you want to just stay up to date on that. You want to be communicating those limits to your employees and making sure that your settings are up to date in your payroll software, your payroll platform. And then verify employee info regularly. So you want to conduct audits to ensure benefit elections and garnishment orders are up to date. So what that means is just when I say audit, I mean looking through your payroll platform, looking through your settings to make sure that what you have in your payroll platform, what you have in your settings reflects your benefit elections. What I mean by benefit elections is, you know, in whatever the benefit is, whatever, you know, if whether it's a health benefit or, you know, a 401k match, anything like that, that those match. Um, and also updating your payroll records promptly after employees report those changes. So if it's a marital status, if they have a new dependent, if they have a baby, okay, that those are all updated promptly after you get that. So the way that we think about this at BridalVision Financial in our payroll team and how we manage this with our clients and our clients' employees is we think about it in two ways. We think about it as transition points. So those places where there's an update for an employee or for the our client company, we think of that as a transition point. So it could be change in marital status, new dependent, a change to a deduction, withholding, something like that. And then on the other side, we're also doing quarterly reviews. So we're reviewing with our clients, okay, we're going through the settings. Is this right? So we're kind of looking at from the bottom up and also the top down. We're also reviewing reports and we have our own internal controls to catch any discrepancies to make sure that we're doing that from a quantitative perspective as well. So that's also part of the audit. Okay, so next is providing detailed pay stubs. This helps with employee trust, but also your employees might find errors. So you want to clearly break down all deductions and ensure that employees can verify the accuracy of their paychecks. And then finally, if you do have in-house staff, you want to train them on these issues. So ensuring that all the payroll administrators are familiar with benefits and garnishment rules to reduce errors. And I wouldn't assume that just because you have an in-house bookkeeper that they know all of this stuff. Okay, I would in a lot of cases, an in-house bookkeeper, like they might not have gotten as much training as an accountant in an accounting firm because there's a lot of resources around somebody in an accounting firm, whereas an in-house bookkeeper is working solo. So, you know, you can point them towards this webinar, towards this video. You can, but just make sure that even at a high level, that they are aware of these points, even if they need to research them themselves. So make sure that your team is trained if you have in-house staff, that they know how to handle garnishments and adjust benefit deductions correctly. Okay, let's talk about mistake number 3, which is incorrect employee classification. And I would say the most common incorrect employee classification is related to independent contractors, or 1099s is probably how you're used to hearing that. Those independent contractors where you're issuing them a 1099 instead of bringing them in-house as a W-2 employee where you're paying their payroll taxes. So the reason that somebody would have an independent contractor 1099 is that you are not paying their payroll taxes. To you, they would be less expensive because you're not paying those payroll taxes. To them, they're paying higher taxes because they have to pay the 35% self-employment tax. The next one that is closely related to this is treating part-time employees as contractors to avoid paying payroll taxes or benefits. So it's just a close second to this it's a subcategory of the 1099 versus W-2. And then the next one is assuming that salaried employees are automatically exempt from overtime laws. So you just want to make sure that you understand the laws around salaried or exempt versus non-exempt employees, and that you are treating your employees in accordance with those laws. And then finally, failing to properly differentiate between exempt and non-exempt employees under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. So you can look that up if you have any questions about that. But just make sure that you know the difference between an exempt and a non-exempt employee. So the risks and consequences to misclassification. The first one can be financial penalties. So misclassification can result in back taxes, interest, and fines from the IRS or Department of Labor in your state. If they determine, let's say they come in and determine that you have a 1099 that should have been a W-2, you can get interest, fines, and back taxes that you need to pay. The next one would be legal action. So employees can actually sue for unpaid wages, overtime, or benefits that they were entitled to as employees. True story. I have a friend that many years ago, I want to say 20 years ago, filed a class action suit against a company that, so it was on behalf of many 1099s that were that she claimed should have been treated as W-2s. So that's just something to be careful with. And where I will say that the 1099 W-2 issue comes into play the most, there's kind of two types of employees where it comes into play for bridal shops. That would be alterations, seamstresses, and then stylists. It is more likely that your stylists are going to be misclassified. And I'm going to get into in the next section a little bit more detail on that. But the next one is audit triggers. So misclassification can lead to tax or labor law audits, which increase the scrutiny of the business, which you don't really want the IRS scrutinizing your business anymore than normal. And then damage to reputation. A lawsuit or an audit for misclassification can just harm your credibility with employees and with your customers. So you don't want that. Okay, the fix. First, just understand employee versus contractor rules. So in the resources below, I'm going to give you a lot more information on 1099s because this is one of the things that can be confusing. So what the thresholds are, like how to understand should somebody be a 1099 versus a W-2. But the best way to go through this is using the IRS's 3-factor test, which is behavioral control. Do you control their behavior at work, financial control, and relationship type? So just to take an example of a seamstress, are you controlling all of the hours that they're working? Are you, do you dictate that, or they're there from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the morning? Do you control how they do their work? Do you control the equipment that they're using? That kind of thing. And then with stylists, it's the same type of thing. Stylists, you get into a little bit more dangerous territory with stylists if you're paying them as 1099s, because most of the time with stylists, you are dictating that they're there at certain times. They're doing their work in the way that you want them to do it. So that you can, I'm usually pretty uncomfortable with categorizing stylists as 1099s. And then, so check out the resource that we have on three-factor test. Okay, so next you can audit the classifications. So you can conduct a review of all your workers to confirm they're classified correctly, make necessary corrections proactively. So even if it means moving somebody from a 1099 to a W-2, that is fine if you make that change, moving them from 1099 to W-2. You don't want to flip-flop back and forth. But if you determine that they are a W-2, just go ahead and reclassify them. And next, again, train your in-house payroll. So ensure that hiring managers, payroll staff, if they're in-house, they understand the difference between employees and contractors. And use written agreements with your 1099 contractors. Those contractors should have written agreements in place that clearly define the roles and expectations and minimize chance for understanding. This is different from controlling the behavior of a W-2 employee. It's a contract between you and the contractor, between the contractor and you, that determines, the scope of work that they're performing, etc. Now the trick is that if a contractor does not have their own agreement, which is the case most of the time, you think about your seamstresses, they are typically not going to come in with a contract in hand. So if they don't have their contract, you can provide them with a template and you can allow them to make suggested changes, but you do want to have that contract in place. And it is worded from the point of view of typically of the contractor, not that you are dictating. You don't want it worded from your point of view where you're dictating to them the work that they're doing. They're dictating to you the work that they're doing. So that's important. And then finally, just consult with legal or payroll experts if you're unsure. Seek guidance from an employment lawyer or a payroll specialist to ensure that you are in compliance if you feel like you're in over your head here. Okay. So that was a lot. But there were some themes there. Payroll is complex. It's complex. There's a lot of room for error. But the fixes are easy as a business owner. And what I have observed is that you kind of move from you're starting out, you start out your business, you're a solopreneur, you start hiring people, and as you grow, the fixes change. Okay, so let's just talk about how to simplify everything that I just talked about. So number one fix: if you are not in a payroll platform, get into a payroll platform. Okay, that is the first priority. So get into Gusto. Links, we have a link to that where you can get into that easily. And then if you're already in a payroll platform, this is kind of like the next phase. Okay, you've been running payroll on your own for a while, and then you're starting to get to a point of overwhelm. That overwhelm might be due to the fact that you have benefits and your payroll is getting more complex and you're worried that it is getting out of hand and you can't handle it anymore. That's one type of overwhelm. Or maybe you have so many employees that it is starting to feel overwhelming. That is another type of overwhelm. Or you just do not have the time to deal with it anymore. You don't have the time to process payroll. That's a point where you want to talk to a professional to get help. Okay. So, you can kind of get into these steps of for anything, whether it's payroll or anything else in your business, you need to realize when you need help, or when it makes sense to pull in either a either a piece of software, a set of systems and processes, or a professional in order to get the help that you need. Because if you don't do that at the right time, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble, especially when we're talking about compliance issues. We're talking about the IRS. We're talking about, your state, your Department of Revenue in your state, things like that. You don't want to mess with that stuff. Okay, so tools and tips, stuff to help you. Info from this talk is in our tip sheet. Everything that I just talked through, you can grab that. Okay, it's totally free. You can grab that. Gusto is our favorite platform. There's a link to that. They give you like $100 card when you sign up, or $200 if you have more than 10 employees. So if you want that link, take it. If you want to sign up on your own, I don't care. There's also a bunch of additional info on 1099s that we just have because we give it to our clients. So I'm going to include all of that. All of that is in the comments, just so that you can have the information that you need if you're continuing to do this DIY. I want to make sure that you do not get into trouble. So if you're kind of at that point where you're in payroll software, but you want to just have this stuff to say, like, check the boxes and say, okay, yeah, I want to make sure that I'm like doing things correctly. That's all available to you. How we can help: join our next office hours, first Thursday of the month at 2 o'clock Eastern. If you want to join that's usually just for our clients. If you want to join them and you want to know what the next one is and you just want to confirm that we're going to be there, drop a comment below. We will give you the link if you want to join the next one. You can also just schedule a discovery call with me if you want to find out more about us, how to work with us, that kind of thing. And I'm Ingrid Heilke of BridalVision Financial. Thanks so much for tuning in. If this resonated with you or gave you some new insights, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'm here to build a thriving, profitable bridal business with you. If you've got questions or want to dive deeper, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out the free resources that we are linking in the comments. It's designed to make your payroll and financial management easier for your shop. Let's keep the conversation going, and I will see you in the next video.